For 2 months, the British government was sitting on a time bomb, a secret so sensitive it could undermine public trust in the very systems that run the country. It wasn't a political scandal or a leaked memo. It was a ghost in the machine, a hostile intruder who had walked right through the digital front door of one of the UK's most important ministries. Then, on a cold December morning, the story didn't break through an official announcement. It was forced into the light by a single cryptic message from a political exile, the infamous Dominic Cummings. Suddenly, government ministers were scrambled onto live television, forced to admit the truth. Yes, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office had been hacked. They assured everyone the intrusion was stopped quickly, that the risk to personal data was low. But here's the problem with that story. The people who broke in weren't petty criminals. The prime suspect is a nation state, one with a cyber army dedicated to espionage and disruption on a global scale. And they weren't there by accident. They were targeting a system connected to the Home Office, a system that potentially holds sensitive visa information. So when the government tells you the risk is low, you have to ask, low for who? Because the game being played here isn't about stealing your credit card details. It's about power, intelligence, and a silent digital war that is already raging. The way this whole story came out is straight from a political thriller. Imagine the scene. It's December 19th, 2025. People are waking up, getting their morning coffee, and a government minister, Chris Bryant, is doing the rounds on BBC Breakfast and Sky News. He's not there to announce a new policy. He's there for damage control. Because Dominic Cummings, the controversial architect of Brexit, now a ghost haunting the halls of power from the outside, had hinted that something was deeply wrong. He'd put the scent of blood in the water, and the press was circling. Bryant had no choice but to confirm it. He explained that back in October, there had been a technical issue in one of our sites. That's the kind of sterile corporate language you use when you don't want to cause a panic, an issue. What he meant was that an unauthorized actor, a hacker, had gained access to the systems of the Foreign Office. He was quick with the reassurances. He said the intrusion was detected and the hole was closed pretty quickly. He painted a picture of competence, of a system working as it should. A silent alarm tripped. The digital guards rushed in and the intruder was expelled. Case closed. But it wasn't closed. It was just the beginning of the public's awareness. For 2 months, while the government knew its fortress had been breached, the public knew nothing. An investigation was happening in the shadows, trying to figure out who got in, what they saw, and more importantly, what they took with them. The official line is that the risk of anyone's personal data being compromised is low. But they also admit that data theft is a possibility. Think about that contradiction for a moment. We think it's unlikely your data was stolen, but we can't rule out that data was stolen. That's like a bank saying, we had a break-in, but we think the robbers were just looking around. The vault is probably fine. It doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, does it? especially when you find out what that vault contained. This wasn't just any old government server. The breach specifically targeted a system that the Foreign Office, the FCDO, operates on behalf of the Home Office. And what does the Home Office handle? Borders, immigration, visas. The data potentially exposed isn't just a list of names and email addresses. It's a treasure trove for any foreign intelligence agency. Visa applications contain a person's entire life story. Their travel history, their family connections, their financial details, their past addresses. It can reveal who is traveling where, for what reason, and who they're meeting. For an intelligence agency, this data is pure gold. It can be used to track dissidents, identify potential spies, or blackmail individuals in positions of power. A person applying for a visa to the UK might be a journalist, a human rights activist, or even a government official from another country. Having access to their file could give a hostile state enormous leverage. So when the minister says the risk to individuals is, quote, low, he might be technically correct in one sense. The hackers probably aren't going to use this information to commit identity fraud and buy a new TV in your name. That's not their goal. The risk isn't to your bank account. The risk is geopolitical. The risk is to national security. The individuals whose data might have been stolen could now be targets for foreign intelligence services. Their risk is anything but low. And the fact that the government still, to this day, cannot or will not confirm exactly what was exfiltrated is the most worrying part of all. The ghost left the building, but no one is sure what it took with it. So, who is this ghost? Who has the capability and the motive to carry out such a sophisticated attack on the British state? In the murky world of cyber espionage, definitive proof is notoriously difficult to find. But all the signs, all the whispers from within the intelligence community point in one direction: China. The UK government, for its own diplomatic and political reasons, has been very careful not to officially name Beijing. Minister Chris Bryant dismissed the question of attribution, calling these kinds of attacks simply a part of modern life. But behind the scenes, the assessment is far more specific. Security experts and intelligence insiders have linked this breach to a constellation of state-sponsored Chinese hacking groups. These aren't teenagers in a basement. These are elite units of the People's Liberation Army and the Ministry of State Security. You might hear names like Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon, APT-27, or Mustang Panda. These aren't random edgy hacker handles. They are designations given by cybersecurity firms to track distinct groups, each with their own tools, techniques, and targets. And their targets are not random. They consistently go after governments, defense contractors, and critical national infrastructure, the nervous system of a country. Their goal isn't just to steal data. It's to map out networks, to understand how a country operates, and to place hidden backdoors that could be used for future disruption or sabotage in a time of crisis. This isn't just speculation. Months before this hack was even made public, the director of GCHQ, Britain's equivalent of the NSA, gave a landmark speech. Ann Keyes Butler stood up and stated unequivocally that China represents the, quote, top cyber threat to the United Kingdom. She described a vast, state-sponsored enterprise with advanced capabilities, propped up by a sprawling commercial ecosystem of hackers for hire. She made it clear that countering this threat was now the single biggest priority for UK intelligence, even more so than Russia. GCHQ, she said, is now devoting more resources to tackling the Chinese cyber threat than to any other mission. This is the context for the Foreign Office hack. It wasn't a random event. It was an expected blow from an adversary that the UK's own spy chiefs had already identified as their primary opponent in the digital domain. The UK, along with its partners in the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, is in a constant clandestine battle against these groups. Of course, China denies everything. When confronted with accusations of hacking, Beijing's response is predictable. They call the accusations groundless, a smear campaign, and then they turn the tables, pointing the finger at the United States, calling it the world's largest cyber bully. It's a classic piece of geopolitical theater. But while the politicians trade accusations, the digital soldiers are still at work. Just days before the FCDO breach was confirmed, the cybersecurity firm Checkpoint Software published a report detailing how Chinese groups had been successfully compromising government servers across Europe for espionage purposes. The FCDO hack wasn't a one-off. It was just the latest battle in a much wider war. The name might be unspoken in public, but in the halls of MI5 and GCHQ, everyone knows who they are fighting. Now, if this was just one isolated incident, you might be able to accept the government's line that it was an issue that was handled. But here is where the story gets much, much bigger. The hack on the Foreign Office wasn't a lightning strike from a clear blue sky. It was a single thunderclap in the middle of a raging storm. The year 2025 has been, for the UK, nothing short of a cyber apocalypse. It's like a Hollywood montage of digital chaos. Let's just run through the list. Jaguar Land Rover, an icon of British manufacturing, was hit by a massive ransomware attack that crippled its operations. The British Library, a keeper of the nation's history and knowledge, was brought to its knees, its digital archives locked, and its services paralyzed for months. Whispers and unconfirmed reports swirled about attacks on the National Health Service, the NHS, the institution people rely on for their very lives. And it wasn't just massive institutions, it was personal. The luxury department store Harrods, a symbol of London itself, admitted that the data of 430,000 shoppers had been stolen. And it was the second time they'd been hit in just 6 months. If you shopped there, your data was likely in the hands of criminals. But perhaps the most chilling attacks were on the very machinery of local democracy. 4 separate London councils were hit by a coordinated attack that targeted their shared IT services. The City of Westminster Council, eventually had to admit that sensitive data had not just been accessed, but copied and stolen. But it gets worse. In a completely separate incident, hackers managed to steal the data of election workers from Oxford City Council. Think about that. The personal information of the people who literally run the elections, now in unknown hands. The National Cybersecurity Center, the NCSC, is now investigating this wave of attacks on councils, trying to figure out how deep the rot goes. When you see all of these events together, the picture changes dramatically. The FCDO hack stops looking like a singular, high-level act of state espionage and starts looking like a symptom of a much deeper sickness. It feels like the entire country's digital infrastructure is under siege, from the highest levels of government to the local town hall, from national treasures to luxury retailers. The government's calm reassurances about one technical issue at the Foreign Office start to sound hollow when you realize the entire house is on fire. This context is everything. It raises a terrifying question. Is the UK's cyber defense simply being overwhelmed? Are we watching a coordinated campaign to test the country's resilience, to find its weak points, and to exploit them one by one? 2025 wasn't just a damaging year for UK cybersecurity. It was the year the warning lights started flashing red across the entire system. And the attack on the Foreign Office was the brightest light of them all. This is where the story pivots from a distant tale of spies and servers into something that affects every single person in the UK. Because this wave of cyber attacks, culminating in the breach of a major government ministry, is pouring gasoline on the fire of one of the most controversial debates in the country right now: the plan for a national digital ID. The government is pushing hard for something called One Login for Government. The idea is simple and on the surface appealing. One single digital identity that you use for everything: paying your taxes, accessing your health records, claiming benefits, proving your age. A single key to unlock every part of your interaction with the state. The government promises it will be more convenient and more secure, but the FCDO hack completely shatters that promise. Critics are now pointing to it as Exhibit A in the case against a national digital ID. The argument is brutally simple. If the government cannot secure the computer systems of its own Foreign Office, a department that is supposed to be a hardened target against state-sponsored spies, how on earth can we trust them to secure a centralized database containing the personal information of every single citizen? It's not just a hypothetical fear. The very system being built, One Login, has already shown signs of weakness. In April of 2025, the investigative outlet Computer Weekly exposed significant vulnerabilities in the platform. More recently, ITV News ran a report highlighting ongoing security concerns. The system, designed to be the Fort Knox of citizen data, had holes in it before it was even fully rolled out. Now layer the FCDO hack on top of that. The government was breached by what is believed to be one of the most sophisticated cyber espionage units on the planet. If a system like that can be compromised, a centralized digital ID database isn't just a convenience. It becomes the single most valuable target for every hostile state and criminal organization in the world. It's not a key, it's a master key. And if it's stolen, the hackers don't just get access to one part of your life, they get access to everything. The breach fuels the nightmare scenario, a single point of failure for the entire nation's personal data. But the stakes get even higher when you look at the type of attack this might have been. This wasn't a simple case of someone guessing a password. Security experts have speculated this could be what's known as an arcane door-style attack. That name sounds like something out of a spy novel, and for good reason. It refers to a real-world campaign discovered earlier in the year, attributed to another state-sponsored group, where hackers used zero-day exploits to break into Cisco firewalls, the very devices meant to keep intruders out. A zero-day exploit is a hacker's ultimate weapon. It's a flaw in software or hardware that the manufacturer doesn't know exists. There is no patch, no defense, because no one knows the vulnerability is there except the attacker who discovered it. Using a zero-day is like having a secret key that can unlock any door of a specific model, while the manufacturer doesn't even know that keyhole exists. The group behind Arcane Door, known as Storm 0558, used these exploits not just to get in, but to achieve persistent code execution. In simple terms, they didn't just smash a window and grab what they could. They installed a permanent, hidden listening device inside the network's own security system. They became part of the furniture, able to watch, listen, and steal information over a long period without being detected. If the FCDO hack was similar, then a minister's statement that they closed the hole very quickly might be dangerously optimistic. You can patch the vulnerability once it's discovered, but how do you know you found all the backdoors the intruder left behind? How can you be sure the ghost is truly gone and not just hiding in a different part of the machine? This elevates the incident from a simple data breach to an act of high-level, military-grade cyber espionage. It's a move in a global cyber arms race, a conflict that mirrors the tensions we see playing out in the physical world, like the Trump-era ban on Huawei over fears of hidden backdoors in their technology. This is the new Cold War, and it's being fought silently on the fiber optic cables beneath our feet. One of the most fascinating and frustrating parts of this entire saga is the communication, or lack thereof, from the government. There's a massive disconnect between the gravity of the situation and the language being used to describe it. On one hand, you have the director of GCHQ calling China the #1 cyber threat and pouring unprecedented resources into fighting them. You have a year of devastating cyber attacks across the country. You have the breach of a major ministry, likely by a hostile state actor. And on the other hand, you have Minister Chris Bryant on television trying to calm everyone down. His quotes are remarkable. He described the constant threat of cyber attacks as just part of modern life. He spoke of the FCDO breach as a technical issue where we closed the hole very quickly. This language is a deliberate strategy. It's designed to do two things: project an image of control and competence, and avoid causing public panic. The last thing any government wants is for its citizens to lose faith in the digital systems that underpin society. But this strategy comes with a huge risk. By downplaying the severity of the threat, it can create a dangerous sense of complacency. Worse, it can breed distrust. When the public senses that the reality of the situation is far more serious than the official line, they start to wonder what else is being hidden. The most glaring example of this is the government's refusal to officially attribute the attack. Despite all signs pointing to China, despite Dominic Cummings' claims, despite the background intelligence, the official position remains one of ambiguity. Why? The reasons are complex and rooted in the delicate dance of international diplomacy. Publicly naming a country like China as the perpetrator of a cyber attack is a major diplomatic escalation. It's a direct accusation of a hostile act. It can trigger retaliatory measures, damage trade relationships worth billions, and push geopolitical tensions to a breaking point. A government needs to be 100% certain of its proof before it takes that step. And even then, it might decide the fallout isn't worth it. They might prefer to handle the response behind the scenes, through intelligence channels or covert countermeasures. But this silence creates a vacuum. It allows the narrative to be controlled by speculation and leaks. It leaves the public feeling like they're not being told the whole truth. The contrast is stark. The quiet, methodical work of the hackers versus the loud, evasive shuffling of the politicians. One side operates with ruthless precision, the other with cautious ambiguity. And caught in the middle is the public, trying to piece together the truth from the fragments of information they're given, wondering if low risk is the truth or just a comforting lie. So where does this all leave us? We started with a secret, a 2-month-old hack on the British government, forced into the open by a political grenade thrown by Dominic Cummings. The official story was one of a minor issue, handled quickly, with low risk to the public. But as we've peeled back the layers, that story has fallen apart. This wasn't a minor issue. It was a breach of one of the state's most sensitive departments, the Foreign Office, by a suspected state-sponsored hacking group from China, the very country the UK's own spy chiefs call their number one cyber adversary. The data at risk wasn't trivial. It was a potential intelligence goldmine of visa information that could be used for espionage and blackmail. This hack didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the crowning moment of 2025, a cyber apocalypse year for the UK, which saw attacks on everything from car manufacturers and the British Library to local councils and the personal data of election workers. It has thrown the government's controversial plans for a national digital ID into chaos, raising the critical question, if you can't protect the Foreign Office, how can you protect all of us? And the nature of the attack itself suggests something far more sinister than a simple smash and grab. The potential use of zero-day exploits, the arcane door style of intrusion, points to a military-grade operation designed for long-term infiltration, not a quick score. This is a battle in a silent, global cyber war. The government told you the risk was low, but what they meant was that the risk to your personal finances was low. The risk to national security, the risk to the integrity of our government institutions, and the risk to the very concept of digital privacy in an age of ever-increasing state surveillance, that risk has never been higher. The ghost in the machine is real. It's sophisticated, it's persistent, and it's not going away. The FCDO hack wasn't the end of the story. It was a warning shot. The question now is whether anyone is truly listening. What do you think? Is the government's response reassuring or deeply concerning? Is a national digital ID a dangerous step too far? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I read as many as I can. And if you want more deep dives into the hidden stories shaping our world, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. Thanks for watching.